What inspired you to write the book?
Well, as I said, these names came into my head, Devilskein and Dearlove, and I just had to create a story for them.
How old was you when you wrote the book?
And my question is, how old were you when you started writing books?
I think when I was about 16, I wrote a really shoddy kind of James Bond ripoff novel. Luckily, it didn't ever emerge from my drawer.
What does the book remind you of?
Um, well, it reminds me of gardens, it reminds me of Long Street in Cape Town, and of course, it reminds me of the original novel, The Secret Garden, and of my early childhood reading experiences.
What's the favourite book you've written?
I suppose books are a little bit like children, so I'm fond of each one for different reasons. I'm also aware of flaws in each one, and but nevertheless, each one is dear to me.
Why? What is your favourite story you've read and why?
Wow, that's a really tough question because there's so many stories and they're so different. It's hard to compare some stories to other stories. Each one has its own value and its own place and its own time when it's especially resonant and meaningful to you as a reader. So I think the world is a richer place for variety. I love all different genres of stories. And sometimes one story is just the perfect thing to read at that time of your life. And maybe at another time of your life, you will look at it again and think, gosh, I don't know why I really found this story so extraordinary. But each one has its time and place, and I couldn't possibly just pick one from the whole multitude of stories that exist.
How many books did you read before you thought of creating that book?
Lots and lots of books, and hopefully there'll be lots more.
Why did you write it?
Um, if I'm not writing, I'm miserable. So I always have to have a writing project, and this was, sometimes you start on something and it just doesn't. There's the initial spark, but maybe you get tired of it halfway along the line. But these characters, Devilskein and Dearlove, were very strong for me, and they simply didn't let me go.
If you would make a second version of that book, of your book, what front cover would it be?
I really like both covers, and it was so interesting to see how different cover artists and different publishers took the content of the novel and created their vision for what the cover should be. I love that diversity, and I wouldn't like to pick one over the other.
Was it hard writing the book?
The only difficult part is being disciplined about showing up to your writing space. And once you start writing, it's an adventure. As with all adventures, it can be quite tough at times, but ultimately it's enriching and exhilarating and sometimes very challenging too. And generally, things don't work out as you expect. And that's really part of the excitement of going on an adventure.
What gave you the idea for the demon?
Well, the names Devilskein and Dearlove came into my head, and I had to then imagine what sort of beings would have such names. And of course, Devilskein, or Devilskin, as some people call him, did seem to be a slightly more demonic name. To a certain extent as well, he's something of a debt collector. Debt is a big issue in the world at the moment, in South Africa, in the UK, and many other places, and it has a very negative effect on many lives. And this was looking at some aspect of debt and interest, secret clauses at the bottom of contracts that you might not read.
What inspired the character of Devilskein, and why did you decide to write about it?
It was those names that came into my head, and to a certain extent as well, he's something of a debt collector. Debt is a big issue in the world at the moment, in South Africa, in the UK, and many other places, and it has a very negative effect on many lives. And this was looking at some aspect of debt and interest, secret clauses at the bottom of contracts that you might not read.
What inspired you to copy not the secret the secret garden instead of writing a new book from scratch?
What made me choose to draw on the secret garden or to copy it? Coming from South Africa, there's a precedent of novels on extremely gritty subject matters, and The Secret Garden had been a childhood favorite of mine. I wanted to write something that my baby boy would enjoy reading one day, that would transport him in the same way as The Secret Garden transported me. And I suppose, in a way, to escape from the confines of what is expected of South African and African literature, I used The Secret Garden as a springboard for this story.
How do you go about your process, and what would you recommend to young writers who wish to write their own stories?
I think the most important thing is discipline. It's wonderful to have an idea and to sit daydreaming about characters and places and fantasy realms that you might create. But to actually turn an idea into a novel of pages that have all been filled up takes sheer discipline, the discipline of regularly showing up at your computer and just writing.
If you want to write stories like Devilskein Dearlove, what sort of advice would you give?
To young writers, I would say follow your passion. Absolutely believe you can make your dreams come true. But you need tenacity, dedication, discipline, and a thick skin, because as with most creative industries, it's quite tough. And when you create something that's close to your heart, it's difficult when someone tells you they don't like it. But the important thing is, if you really love writing, you just keep going.
What inspired you to start writing?
A love of stories and of escaping into different worlds and lives, travel. I've always loved traveling, and each story takes you on a journey. It's different to reading a story. When you write it, it's a different kind of journey that you go on.
When she was at school, was her favourite subject English?
Yes, I really did love English at school, and I also really liked my English teachers. They seemed to be the nicest of all the teachers. And my favorite parts of English were, obviously the creative writing and also studying literature. Wasn't that good at grammar and spelling, but strangely now I have a sideline job as a grammar teacher, so I've made up for it.
Erin reflect who she is?
I think that every writer, every character that you create is in some way has some aspects of you in it. You can't help that because it's your creation. And so definitely there are aspects of Erin that reflect me. For example, her love of the Chinese garden definitely reflects my love of gardens and also of Chinese culture. But I could say that the other characters, including the demon, have also got aspects of me in them.
When did you first find your idea, and how long did it take you to eventually come to the idea that became your book?
Well, I usually find with novels from the very first spark, like the first time those names pop into your head or you see something that inspires you, from that moment to a book on a bookshop shelf, it takes about 4 years. So maybe I'm wrong I haven't miscalculated, but I think in my experience it's been like that. The book goes through many, many drafts, and this one's first draft took probably 4 months to complete. So a novel was written, but it's certainly not the novel that people are reading now. It's had characters have changed, names have changed, places have changed. Virtually everything has changed. Thank you for your questions.